to all the panelists and all the other people attending and who are part of the audience. So it's my great pleasure to be moderating this session. So my name is Ashok Das, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I'm also part of the executive committee of the Center for South Asian Studies. So this is panel number 6 of our symposium, and it is titled Adaptation and Resilience. So I believe we have, Saloni just updated me that we have 4 papers to be presented. I think one person is unable to make it. So we will follow the order that I have in front of me. So our presenters will be Shutirthol Lahiri from the University of Minnesota, followed by Abhishek Chakravarti from Sai University, Pondicherry University, and Jiban Mani Podal from the Central Department of Anthropology in Tribhuvan University, and Aradhana Singh from IIT Kanpur and the Government PG Thalisain College. So without further ado, I would like to invite Shutirthol Lahiri to take over and present his paper. So welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashok. And thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen right now. Is this visible? Okay. Well, good evening, good morning to everyone who's here. It's 9 o'clock here, so I'm kind of late evening for me. I am Sutir Salahiri, a PhD student at the University of Minnesota, and I'll be honest that I'm a biodiversity scientist, so this is my first foray into a non-ecological, non-biology conference, but I'm excited to be here. I came across the advertisement on Twitter, and I wanted to share some of my work. So today I'm going to talk about grassland conservation and restoration in India. And this is a work that I did with one of my colleague, Anirban Roy, and Forrest Fleshman, who is a professor here. Just to give you a background, I began getting interested in grasslands because I study birds. So I study birds in the Himalayan foothills grassland of the Terai, but I mostly do my studies in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh. I'm from Assam, so I do my studies there. And I've been studying grassland birds for the past 3-4 years now, and the map down below sort of gives a rough idea about where these grasslands are located. They're usually flooded by the Brahmaputra and Ganga river. And but when I began studying birds and I began working in these landscapes, something that could not escape my attention is the fact that grasslands are not like inviolate spaces. They're not spaces that are exclusively for biodiversity, and they have a lot of people who are managing these landscapes and keeping them as it is. And this is something that's unique of a lot of different ecosystem, and quite contrary to a lot of Western thoughts that wilderness should be an inviolate space. People have been shaping landscapes for millennia. They've been using fire, they've been using grazing, and this applies to forests, this applies to grasslands and any other ecosystem you think about. But what we know right now is a lot of these practices have been very actively restricted. And if you think about grasslands in particular, we know from a lot of studies now that disturbance and practices like fire and grazing are very important for a grassland to remain a grassland, because if you remove any of those, they turn into a different landscape, they turn into a forest. So essentially, what I'm trying to say here is that grasslands need some form of disturbance to remain as such. But as we know, these practices have been suppressed globally. So if we think about the mega fire incidences in North America, or if we think about grazing bans in India, these are all these are all incidences that are occurring because well, the practices of local communities are being suppressed. And this is very fascinating to me because in India, we have a lot of different kinds of grasslands. So in the upper panel, you can see that the three different kinds of grasslands that we have in India. One is a mountain grassland in the Western Ghats, which are high altitude grasslands. The second one is a terai grassland in the lowland Himalayan belt. The third one is a semi-arid grassland, which you get in central and western India. And all these unique grasslands have very unique biodiversity. Because I study birds, I had to give an example of birds. So these are three species that are endemic to these grasslands, meaning that they're not found anywhere else. And so one question that I had at the outset of my PhD was, if we have so many unique grasslands and if we have so many unique biodiversity, why are they not in conservation discourse? So with that question, what I did is, for one of my during my first year, I took this up as a small assignment. I did a review of articles and government policy briefs and media book chapters, technical reports, and I divided that into a pre and a post-colonial independence period. And this came out recently as a research article, review article in restoration ecology. And I'm going to go over some of the findings that we had from that. And what we realized is, first of all, there is a huge colonial legacy in the way we see grasslands in India. So, and it stems from the British conquest, and where they did not find any value in grasslands because they did not have trees in it. And the first thing that they did was calling them as wastelands. And a wastelands is a term that is used for not just grasslands, but any non-forested ecosystem in India and in other countries also. In the US, you have lots of areas labeled as wastelands, different contexts, but and so what happened was, because these wastelands did not have trees, there were no economic values, and so the first thing that happened was tree plantation started happening. So if you look at these pictures to your right, this is from a paper by Atul Joshi and colleagues in 2018, where they trace the transformation of a landscape from a mountain grassland all the way to a forest from 1830 to 2015. And this is a trend that we are seeing throughout the world, right? We're seeing that trees are being disproportionately favored for climate change talks. Trees are being favored as a mode of restoration in many countries and in continents as well. And this is a map that's very interesting to me. So if you, so because the wasteland concept was introduced by the British, it still persists to this day. And we have a wasteland authority, which maintains a wasteland atlas of India. So the smaller map in this figure essentially maps all the wastelands. And if you look at the larger map, that's a distribution map of grasslands in India. This is a fairly recent paper by MD Madhusudan and Abhi Vanak, who map, and you can see the amount of overlap that exists between wastelands, what is called as wastelands in governance parlance, and what we know as grasslands in India. And through our review, what we found out was, because India is signatory to a lot of global and national climate change and degradation goals, they've installed a lot of policies and implementations, and all of those, I won't go into too much details of those, but essentially what I want you all to get out of this is, a lot of those policy implementations are disproportionately forest centric. So all of those, with a red arrow, you can see that they negatively impact grasslands. And it's only through the action of certain protected areas or the action of local communities that grasslands as it is thrives in India today. And a direct consequence of the wasteland framing in India was also the suppression of pastoralism and communities owning lands and practicing grazing and fire. So, and I know a lot of you are familiar with the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. This act was basically used by the British because they were wary of people who were not sedentary, who were not in one place at one time. So they restricted access to land, they prevented grazing, and they also prevented fire practices, which, as I may have convinced you, are important for a grassland to remain grasslands. And so all of these culminate into grasslands being converted to either forests, they are being leased for large scale power projects. So you can see solar panels coming up in these vast arid grasslands. They are being converted to plantations, which is a huge thing in India right now. And they're also been ridden by invasive species like lantana, which completely degrades any ecosystem and deprives it of any livelihood or biodiversity value. And this is a trend, as I mentioned earlier, this is a trend that's been picking up throughout the world. We have continent scale mass afforestation efforts. 5 minutes left. Okay. And we see that this planting trees has become sort of like a value statement where there's no regard to whether that plant or that forest will survive, but it's important for us to think of forests as the sole savior from climate change. And this is a very flawed concept that people are trying to dispel at the moment, because it directly negates all efforts by people to advocate for non-forested ecosystem. And another direct consequence of not calling a grassland and calling it wasteland is you pave the way for these habitats to be destroyed by mega development projects like dams. So this is my field site. I'll just quickly play this video. It's like a 10-second. You can see the transformation that the river has. This is Deering Wildlife Sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh. And the river basically has flooded so much because of changes to its hydrology, because of dams upstream, that the land has completely fragmented and the river has taken over. I did some remote sensing analysis of this last semester, and you can see that in just 20 years, the river and flooding events have completely taken over a huge chunk of land from this one wildlife sanctuary, which is essentially a grassland protected area. And I just want to conclude this by saying that a lot of ecologists and conservationists have likened this scenario of ignoring grasslands or any other non-forested ecosystem as biome awareness disparity. It's a new concept. People like to come up with new phrases, but it essentially says that because we are so blinded by the idea of forests being important, that we ignore other ecosystems. And what we propose out of the paper that I worked on was that in India, we need a new system of classification that recognizes grasslands and its biodiversity and not focus only on forested ecosystems. We recognize that it's important for us to give land and agency back to communities to continue their practices, to enhance their livelihood and maintain their cultural practices. And it's also time for us to think about as a larger international community of conservation and climate change active practitioners to go beyond tree plantations as a fix for climate change. And I think going beyond this would help us kind of appreciate the value that each of these ecosystems have in our effort to fight climate change. And with that, that's my talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sutirtha. I think this was a fascinating presentation. I think you illuminated what is probably a very less acknowledged landscape ecology and probably widely misunderstood. So thank you so much. And I'm sure you'll get very interesting questions towards the end.
Yeah, I'm eager for that. Thank you.
And so thank you so much. Okay, so our next presenter is going to be, I think, Abhishek Chakraborty. So Abhishek, all yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. So to start off, I'm Abhishek Chakraborty. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Law, Sai University. I work on environmental regulations, climate governance, rights of indigenous people. So this paper, which I'm going to discuss here, is a part of our ongoing project. it's a long-term research work where we are planning to look at climate governance in India, institutional response to climate change, map out the entire framework, and so on. So to be very specific, this particular area which I will discuss in today's presentation is, assessing the adaptive capacity to address loss and damage in the Eastern Himalayan landscape. So if I just want to give you an overview of the landscape here. So if you look at it, Eastern Himalaya is a huge region, actually. Many people think it's only the northeastern part of India, but actually it starts somewhere in Nepal, goes across Bhutan, the northeastern region of India, into parts of Western Myanmar, and even into the Yunnan province of China. It has a variety of landscape, from montane forest, temperate forest, to tropical rainforest, and also wet savanna grasslands of Terai, which my friend Sutitha was discussing a moment ago. So it's a varied ecosystem, home to over 250 different indigenous people groups and a population of over 10 million people, and also a major source of water for Asia. Some of the biggest rivers in South and Southeast Asia, like Irrawaddy or the Brahmaputra, flows through this region. And for this, we have specifically selected 2 locations in the state of Assam for our specific study. Primarily because there was in 2018 a Government of India report which showcased that Assam is in the vulnerability index, one of the most severely affected regions by climate change. And there we took in 2 specific locations. The first was a river island called Majuli. It is considered one of the largest riverine island in the world, which is inhabited and is severely affected by flood and river erosion, home to over 150,000 people belonging to several indigenous people groups. And what we see here is a small pottery community at a village called Halmara in Majuli, which is under severe threat because of effects of climate change, slow onset events, and so on. So basically, the scenario there is the region is severely affected by river erosion. And as such, the government had to put a ban on extraction of clay in the area. And this community had been engaged in pottery for what the records say, and what we found out there is for over last 600 years. And it's a community of over 3,500 people. And it's a very traditional livelihood. That is what the people are skilled at. And because of this ban, the government came up with the ban because, extraction of clay, what they claim was extraction of clay from the river bank was leading to more severe erosion. And erosion, what has been seen gradually, erosion has been increasing because the change in rainfall patterns and other climatic conditions. Because if you look at older rainfall data, you would see that rain was distributed throughout the month and so on. But lately, what has been observed is that one fine day you have a month's rainfall which otherwise fell throughout the month. It would fall on a single day, and this would severely degrade the upper soil in those regions, and hence this has been affecting the livelihood of the community there. And a lot of young people are migrating to different cities, different other parts of India, and working in informal sector. In fact, we are seeing a climate induced migration kind of a scenario, so this is one of the areas we looked at. The second region which we looked at was Dibrugarh district in Assam, which is again, although it's within a radius of some 200 kilometers from Majuli, but again a slightly a different landscape where you see more of tea gardens. There are thick evergreen rainforests. One of the biosphere reserves of India, Debrusoikwa National Park, is there. Then a region known as, some people even call it Amazon of the East, Dihing Patkai rainforest, which is one of the last remaining lowland rainforest in India, is there. And this region is inhabited by one of the communities, which are the tea tribe. So these people were brought in from central India by the British colonial tea planters to work in tea gardens. And for the last 200 years, the community has been engaged in tea production. And this region of Dibrugarh is a part of world's largest tea growing region in Brahmaputra Valley. And here also we see that, the changing climate is leading to decline in tea production, is affecting the local ecosystem. So many of the organic tea growers depend on the different, small insects which live in the tea gardens, because some insects prey on the other, and the need for pesticides is sometimes not required because of the existing the ecological balance which is there. But with change in climate, you see different new species of insects coming in those regions, and the ecological balance is affected. And also the rainfall, if we look at Assam now, last couple of days, the temperatures have been over 7 to 8 degrees above normal. And this trend has been seen for last couple of years. This winter, 2022, was said to be the driest winter in the region. But we require winter rains for the first flush of tea. So the first flush is affected sometimes because of hailstorms. Severe hailstorms and untimely hailstorms are affecting the tea buds. So production of different kinds of tea, like the white tea, where the bud is used, because when a hailstorm comes, the bud is damaged. White tea production is impacted. Similarly, some of the tea production techniques require certain certain kind of temperature to be in place. Like oolong requires a low temperature and certain kind of humidity, and which is being affected because of climate change, because change in climate. And the tea growing community, especially the small tea growers and the tea tribe people, have been adversely affected by climate change. And it is not uncommon to see climate induced migration among them, and also women in these communities fall prey to trafficking. And I, in fact, sometime in 2018, did a study on climate induced migration and trafficking in Assam, where I actually observed that a large chunk of the people who are rescued, who were otherwise trafficked to major cities in India, come from this community of tea tribe. And this has been because of change in tea production, and in a way climate change impacting the production of tea in the region. So based on these two locations and the UNFCCC's loss and damage mechanism, we look at the climate governance challenges, the challenges of the current mechanism which is in place, especially in regard to assessing loss and damage. So for our audience, I just want to give an overview of what loss and damage mechanism is. Basically, the term came up in 2007 at COP13 in Bali. Basically means the negative loss and damage basically means the negative impacts from climate change, and which was further improvised through the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage, which wanted to facilitate dialogue between countries, fill knowledge gaps, and enhance action and support for those affected by climate change. The mechanism kept on developing. Then we had Santiago Network established at COP25, which wanted to connect developing countries with the providers of technical assistance to fight against climate change. And 2022 at Sharm el Sheikh, we saw a turning point, a major development where even EU pledged support to loss and damage fund, and a transitional community was set up to look into setting up funds and operation of funds. And these do seem like something positive through which we can fight, which would strengthen our fight against climate change. And however, the challenge remains in the existing loss and damage assessment mechanism in India. What we have is very traditional departments which are non-inclusive of members. It's a very top-down approach. You do not have members representing the local community here. So you have the National and State Disaster Management Authority, the Revenue Department of the state, and the district administration. So they basically make an assessment of the damages which has happened, and they primarily focus on, post-disaster relief. So whenever there's a flood or erosion or such extreme climate events, they just take an assessment of the economic losses which might have happened, loss of their farmlands or their shelter or livestock. And based on that, they give a certain amount of compensation to the people. But what is missing is that the current mechanism is limited to post-disaster relief only and extreme climate events. Slow onset events and non-economic negative impacts of climate change are not being addressed. And many of these places where we see the impacts are not visible. These are slow onset events. Last year, the temperature was supposed 2 degrees above normal. This year, it's been 5 degrees above normal. So it's not that clearly visible, where therefore this current mechanism which we have is unable to address some of these issues. And overall, which we have seen is a non-inclusive climate governance framework. You do not see the involvement of the community in assessment and governance. Non-economic damages like climate-induced trauma or migration due to climate change, loss of traditional community livelihood, as we saw in the pottery community or the tea growing community, these are not being addressed. And also what we need is an effective and also a transparent climate governance framework, because whenever one of the things which arguments put forward by developed countries while pledging to fund developing countries in fighting climate change is that they want more transparency in the governance structure, and which has been missing in many of the developing countries. And therefore, that is another thing which we need to focus on, having a more effective and transparent climate governance framework. And one way towards it is involving the community and having a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. And the approach we have currently has been going on since the colonial times. You see the same kind of the revenue department, district administration assessing the damages. And so those changes are what we require, and this is what we are working on as a part of our ongoing projects. Just wanted to share a bit of that with you all, and thank you for giving me this platform and organizing this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Another excellent presentation. I must admit, as someone who hails from Assam, I'm very, very pleased to see so much, such interesting research and vital research being done by young scholars. So kudos to everyone. And so I'm looking forward to the other two presentations. So next is Jiban Mani Paudel, and his paper is Sustainability of Pastoralism in the Himalayas, a case study from 2 yak herding communities in Nepal. So Jiban, it's yours. The floor, please, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I cannot share my file. Yeah.
Are you having some issue?
No, I also have his file
Okay,
on.
so do you want, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Jibin, you can just maybe call out the next slide, and I think Saloni can advance for you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Saloni. Yeah.
Can I start right now?
Yes, please. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning from Nepal, and good evening from Hawaii. And this is me, Jivan Manipaudil, and the assistant professor at Center Department of Anthropology, Tribhuvan University. Am I audible?
Yes, you are very clearly audible. Thank you.
Yeah. My area of interest is the Himalayan environment, especially human dimensions of climate change and the livelihood. And the title of my presentation is The Sustainability of Pastoralisms in the Himalayan, a case study from the 2-year coding community. I start my presentation on the sustainability of pastoralisms in the Himalaya with the three statements that I heard from my informant and my student. And the first one is, my cattle herds may not be continued. It will be ended with my last breath. This is the statement of old ornaments that I heard from my student who is studying herding in the Lamtang Valley. And the second one is today Ramromancy, that is the capable persons work in the development program, run businesses, work in offices, teach at a school, and go to the foreign countries for making money. Only the big recommendation, less capable persons stay at a goat. This statement was made by the Nandakasi Gurung, a 63 years old woman, when I was doing my PhD in 2012 in Monang. And the last one is, the yak are the ornaments of the mountain, and we should attack outsiders and sell to them. This is the statement by Devi Nepal, a 65 years old ornament from the Falun, the eastern Nepal, where I did research in 2021 about the yak herding and the tourism. These three statements put us in the dilemma about the sustainability and the continuity of the pastoralisms in the Himalayan. The first two statements are more pessimistic about the future of pastoralisms, where the later one is optimistic. However, the climate change, youth of migration, tourism, development interventions, and the biodiversity protection program are putting pressure on herding livelihoods and increasing the vulnerabilities of the pasture communities across the Himalayan regions. This paper is this presentation is based on the study in two community. One is from the Monang, where I did my PhD fieldwork from 2012 to 2014, and the second one was the Palelong, located in the eastern Nepal, where I did research in 2021 about the relation between the yak herding and the tourism. Thereafter, I am still hanging with these two communities, either virtually or physically. Here, the questions of sustainability of the pastoralisms is the challenging issues in the Himalayan, which in this presentation, I try to examine through the three interlocking variables, that is the climate change, market, and the marketizations of the market or the governance. The climate change, the observed, and this is one of the major challenging of pastoralisms in the Himalayan. The observed trend of temperature in the Himalayan region is higher. It is 2 times greater than the global average. In Monang, the observed trend is in the positive trend, which is increasing by 0.034 degree per year, more or less the same trend in the eastern Nepal too. Local orders also notice changes in the temperature and precipitation patterns in their localities. Both less and more erratic snowfalls are observed and experienced by. When I was doing in field work in the Mona, and I heard a statement frequently that is the so chromim lay I. This is the Gurung language, and it means the soil forgot to cry from my elderly informant. In the past, there was a heavy snowfall in their village, and it used to cover the land for several days. As a result, their soil used to cry. But in the recent decades, there is a little snowfall, and some years have passed without any snowfall. Thereafter, their soil also forget to cry. If we look at this statement from the Western science perspective, it is a nonsense issue because the soil is a non-living things. And non-living things cannot cry, cannot grow, and cannot make any sense at all. But if we look this statement from the local people perspective or from their own worldview, it make great sense to them. It is a local way of expressing the changes in the precipitation pattern in their area. For the Himalayan herders, climate change is not just the hotter temperature and shifting the snowfall or declining snowfall. It is also about the threat of the sustainability of Himalayan pastoralisms due to sinking of meadows and declining of ground grasses, the unavailability of water for their cattle, shifting of livestock habitat, and invasions of cattle unfriendly grasses and the fodder. For examples, the local herders in the Palelung told me that the new invasive plant species like lalchand and the jurokanda have been rapidly expanding in their area. Some new species are poisonous and some are cattle unfriendly. It is creating a threat to the availability of the ground grasses to them, which is the main source of fodder for the Himalayan livestock. And it also will create a conflict between the domestic livestock and the wild livestock in the future. Similarly, ongoing climate change is also posing challenges in the habitat of the livestock. For example, in Monang, the local yak herders used to keep their yak herds at the Kromche located at 3,100 to 3,200 meter altitude from the sea level. And that place is no more suitable to keep yak in the winter. So they left the place in 2008 and started to keep their yak herds at Wagrichi, which is a high altitude grazing land that is located in 3,600 to 3,700 meter altitude from the sea level. And one of my informants here, an interesting issue about the impact of climate change on yak herdings. Yeah, they lost the yak at Kromche due to heavy snowfall in the past, but now they begin to lose their yak by heat. A few days ago, one of my informants from the Falun also shared the information about the loss of yak due to late snowfall in the Falun. Two herders lost their two nak, milking yak or female yak due to sliding in snow. All these events are telling us that the climate change is posing challenges to herding in the Himalayan that can lead to the uncertainties of pasture life in the region. And the second variables that I want to talk is the marketizations or the commercializations. There is no consensus among the scholars on marketizations or the commodification support for the sustainability of the rural livelihood. Some scholars argue that it positively contributes to the improvement of rural livelihood, whereas others disagree on this statement. Nori and Scones in their paper argue that the privatizations or the individualizations of the resource create the new markets for the capitalist. It generates the new environmental value that ultimately produce the unsustainability. I also agree with them, but in my studies, I found that the market and the commodification produce both positive and the negative consequences for the pastoralists. The plantation of the cash crops and the fodder tree in the private farmland, commercialization of community forests through the plantations of tree in the private farmland, through the plantation of cash crop, construction of hydropower project, and construction of building in the rangelet for the tourist have badly affected the grazing land and restricted the seasonal mobilities of the livestock, which is the main adaptive strategy of the Himalayan pastoralist. Similarly, out-migrations of the youth is posing a great challenge to the continuity of livestock. It is reported that more than 1,700 Nepalese peoples travel abroad for the employment daily. It is creating a scarcity of the herding in the Himalaya. In Monang, I was visited the last time in 2018. The herders used to move their livestock to the lowland for grazing in the winter, but it was restricted after plantation of cash crops in the private farmland and the community forest. In 2015, one of the herders paid rupees 15,000 Nepali as compensation for damaging the cash crop. After that, a few households left the occupation. Similarly, the narratives were also the same narratives also reported in the Falun too. I found the significantly different situation in the Falun. Yeah, the connections with the global market, crossbreeding, hoarding through the dairy product like the dog chew and the butter. Recently, they have connected with the market through the yak festivals and the yak tourisms, or the concept of goat stay, that is living in goat. It's creating a new opportunities for earning money. When it linked with the new market through the yak tourisms, the number of yak herders have increased in those areas. An interesting fact was that the youths were found more interested in the yak herding. This shows that the pastoralism and the big recomances are not a synonymous one that I heard in the Monang in 2012. It is a prestigious and money-making occupations. It is the occupations of the capable person too. In the winter of 2012 and 2013, in the between the
I'm sorry, we only have
okay.
one. Thank you. If you can conclude. Thank you.
Yeah. And I have 5 minutes. Yeah.
No. Only 1 minute left. Like if you
Yeah.
can
Okay. I will complete. Yeah. And yeah, and the second part, yeah, they can making money by the tourism. And the third one is the governance and the institutions. Yeah. In the name of conservation and the development in the Himalayan regions through the declaration of national park, conservation area, protected area, protecting the endangered species, state is differently reconstructing the concept of Himalayan pasture land. It controls the access to resources, especially the rangeland that the Himalayan communities has been used for the generations. The local orders saw the state-making process as a threat to their livelihood and their culture. And then on the basis of this finding, I reach in this conclusion that I draw these conclusions. The finding reveals that the climate change, access to the market, and the government has posing both opportunities and risks to the sustainability of the pastoralism in the Himalaya. So we should understand it in contextually rather than universalizing the Himalayan pastoralism. In the Monang, we see the trade, but in the eastern Nepal, that is the Falun, the marketization is also producing the opportunity to the local people. So we have to see the pastoralism through the context, but you know, the climate change and market and the governance as posing more risks to the sustainability of the pastoralism. Thank you for giving this platform.
Thank you, Jivan. That was very, again, very insightful, very different, and I'm sure you'll get some opportunity to expound on the things that you probably had to rush through a little bit. So, okay, our last presenter for this session is Aradhana Singh, and the paper she is presenting is titled Climate Change, Planned Adaptation and Making of Resilient Uttarakhand, India. So Aradhana, it's all yours. Thank you. Yeah. Aradhana, you can begin. I think, yeah, if you.
Radha, you're still mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, so yeah, we can't hear.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute myself.
Okay, yeah, no worries, yeah.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is. You can also maybe go full screen with the, yeah, so.
Yeah, but I made the mistake of going. Is it possible to do it now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you go, I think just press the next one. I think you should be able to, yeah. I think, let's see, slideshow, you should.
No, right there. The
one that you didn't press, yeah, I think if you're.
This one?
Next. The last one, yeah. No, the next one.
Yeah, I think this is fine, no?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
This-
thank you so
thank
much for giving me this opportunity. The paper I'm presenting here is a part of my PhD work. And I recently, few days back, successfully defended my PhD work. And so this work is regarding a very grounded, very local voiced ethnographic work that I'm presenting here. The work is titled Climate Change, Planned Adaptation and the Making of Resilient Uttarakhand. So this work mainly talks about the intervention which is being carried out by the subnational government of Uttarakhand in a teeny tiny village nestled in central Himalayas. And the way it is being done that I have documented in my PhD work. So the outline of my presentation is that first I'll introduce you to my study, then I'll talk about the context, then I'll familiarize you with the setting of my study, and then the methodology I've employed, and the research question I'm exploring, and finally to the findings of my study. So we all are talking about climate change because it has become a very persistent and a necessary problem that needs to be addressed. So the IPCC report and all the other reports by NAS, AMA talks about this consistently. And in these reports, it is mentioned, and like my previous presenters have also talked about this, that we cannot disconnect the ecosystem, the biophysical, or the human societies. So we need to look at all these things in a holistic manner. So this requires planning, and we need to address the impact which is being made on the ecosystem as well as the human societies. So Eckstein point out that climate change and the extreme weather events cause the most suffering to the countries which are still developing, and thus they have a lower coping capacity. And thus we need to concentrate on developing countries, and especially the ones which are having agriculture as their livelihood. So the work I have explored here talks about an agrarian community. And in this agrarian community, I talk about planned adaptation efforts being carried out, and I evaluate how these affect the northern Indian Himalayan region. So the context of my study is the central Himalayan region. And here, all the governments prepared a national action plan for climate change in the year 2008. And accordingly, the Uttarakhand government also prepared an action plan, keeping in mind all the guidelines given by the National Action Plan Committee. And this is being looked after by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in the country as well as in Uttarakhand. So the setting of my study is the state of Uttarakhand. It was created in the year 2000 and is situated in the central Himalayas, to be precise. And before 2000, it was part of the erstwhile Uttar Pradesh in the northern India. The meaning of Uttarakhand translates to upper northern, and the Uttarakhand consists of two political divisions. Garhwal and the Kumaon region. My study area lies in the Garhwal region, and the study area range. And agriculture is the primary occupation. It's quite undulating, and the land holdings are very small. And am I audible?
Yes,
Am
you
I
are.
audible?
Yeah, there was some disturbance in the middle.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a very remote place. So can I stop the video because it's showing unstable internet connection?
Yes, why don't you, just use audio and maybe this. And
Can
if
I
you
go
want,
off camera? That helps, huh? That helps the
Saloni can
connection.
clarify. Saloni, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, sure.
Can she?
I'll be coming on and off the camera because it's giving unstable connection. It
Yes.
might become better.
Yes.
So I'll come back. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So this is a agrarian community, and they have a very small land holdings. They are not very big landholders or big farmers. They are very they have a very small and fragmented land holding. But the interesting thing is here that each family holds some amount of land in their name, and they, even though the land is very inferior, but they grow something or the other for their own consumption. And sometimes if the bounty is good, they are able to sell it also. So the farming community recently has been badly affected because of the climate change. And I'll talk about this after I present my methodology. So I have utilized a multi-sited ethnographic approach for my study, as my research sites extends multiple sites, because I was talking to the government officials, I was looking at the markets, I was also visiting the consultants for this project, and I was visiting boardrooms meetings, public meetings, and I stayed in the village for some 18 months. So this interaction led me to several opportunities for data collection. And I have employed other techniques such as interviews, participant observation, and I have interviewed both male and female who were above 18 years of age for my study. And I've also used secondary data such as journal articles, government documents, and reports. So my study takes 2014 as the starting point year, because the climate change adaptation project emerged on the planning front in Uttarakhand in this year. And the Uttarakhand government started implementing this plan, which is called the Adaptation Action Plan. In this plan, the government proposed to bring changes in the agriculture. They plan to do it by bringing in improved seeds. They want to bring in fertilizers. They want to bring in improved seeds such as which are very biotechnically sounded way. And they want to offer loans. They want to give agriculture based industries. They also wished in the beginning to give insurance for the crops, but until recently this has not happened. Said they want to bring in collection centers, they want to bring in cold stores, and also they want to bring an economic model which is green and carbon neutral, and they plan to make the Uttarakhand state completely carbon neutral by 2024. So my inquiry was basically about the how is the farming community um, impacted by the climate change as they are a farming community, and how this project is making them resilient. So I have talked to people in the community, in the village, and uh, Anju Devi, a woman in her mid-40s, observed that uh, my question was to them was like, how have you, how your lifestyle or your everyday living has been affected by the climate change. So this lady pointed to the one water source, which is they call in their language Sroth. It is a natural spring aquifer. She points to that direction and she tells me that this has become quite frail. Earlier, they used to see water all year round, but when it comes to the beginning of the summers or the month of June, it begins to dry up. The participants also concurred that the onset of the rain has completely shifted, and they tell that it has shifted to the month of May, which was earlier April. So this shift, people tell me, farming community tells me that this has caused considerable disruption in the crop cycle, and their cropping has been delayed by a month or so. So this farmer, who is a senior citizen, who was up until now uh, farming in a normal fashion like they do in a farm, but now because of the perplexity, because of this changing crop cycle, he has shifted to a polyhouse farming. But even then he says that whenever there is too much heat, then whatever crop is growing inside the polyhouse gets wilted, and it causes me a loss. So the farming community, as we all know, follows a seasonal calendar, and which has been passed on to them from previous generations. So this knowledge of seasonal patterns plays a significant role in these small farmers planning regarding what to plant and when. So based on this calendar, the likely season and the expected weather patterns, they prepare the land, they sow the seeds, water the crop, and harvest. And according to the farmers, climate variability has caused seasonal patterns distortions. Now the farmers are hardly sure about the time to sow. This has affected the seasonal calendar, and it has considerably affected the farming system and the practices they used to have. The farmers categorize seasons into a year into a seasons, and they say that uh, the dry season, which used to happen from December to April of the following year, has been extended by a duration. And while the rainy season that used to begin from May to November every year has decreased in duration. So Darshan Singh, who is considerably a young farmer, he says, I sow the seeds and leave it up to chance. If it rains, the seeds will germinate. Excuse me. If not, I will try again. And whatever little grows will be consumed within the household itself. Another farmer who is in his mid-20s, Dilip feels that the uncertainty has become problematic for the farmers who often have to go far to seek jobs and to substantiate their income. Dilip has been fortunate to get a contractual job in a nearby school as a peon. However, other boys invariably must leave the village and go to the cities in search of jobs that can give them extra income. So Dilip observes that whatever the season in the plain, it happens a little late in the season in the hills. The harvesting of the crops, such as wheat or paddy in hills, used to happen after a month or so. But now we have to wait at least 2 months or more. And if the rains occur at that time when the crop is standing, then our efforts go in vain. Farmers feel that rainy season has become shorter than in the past. The rain used to last for around 6 months, but now it hardly lasts for 2 months. This duration has affected the selection of crops. Farmers now admit that they grapple with the choices of the crops, and they also confess that the farming has become very demanding, highly competitive, and expensive. And they also share that sometimes they have to go find menial jobs as laborers just to substantiate the cropping, the expenses coming to them from the cropping. Uh, so how is the government planning this adaptation exercise? So as we have seen that climate change impacts the mountain agriculture has led to wavering, unstable productivity and overall decline in food production. Almost all interviewees admitted that they are struggling to adapt to the changing socioeconomic and climate conditions. The farmers revealed that traditional crop production heavily depends on rainfall. So they are now not interested in planting the traditional seeds. They are facing decline in the production in the last 2 to 3 years. Farmers say that they are feeling constrained because of the undulating land, which is quite narrow field. They have quite narrow fields, limited land holdings, but they also on their own have tried to compensate for the loss of food products or loss of income. So they have done it by doing this, adopting vegetable cultivation. They do livestock rearing, and they also go for other income generating jobs such as taxi drivers. The option for going as taxi drivers is quite popular in Uttarakhand. The farmers again confided that they are able to recognize the problem arising out of changing climate, but they say that they lack the knowledge on how to mitigate and adapt to the changing climate. They said that they feel helpless and perplexed because of it they are reducing the interest in agriculture. And they have also shared that now agriculture has become very, very hard work and strenuous job for them. It requires a lot of physical labor now. But still, it is quite interesting that they say that we are not going to leave farming completely. They say that we are, the older generation especially says that we are going to continue to farm. Keval Singh, a farmer, expressed that as a farmer, it is very important for my identity, and land is my most important item. If I plant every season, I should be able to get some output. If I leave the land fallow, I will not get much. If tomorrow I get a chance to get a job in the city, I would still continue to farm. In the same context, some people express that they want their children to get job in the urban centers while they will continue to farm in the village. A very senior citizen in the village, Tara Devi, commented that youths are leaving the village and migrating. Typically, one from each household seems to have migrated
I'm
to
sorry.
places like,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. Can you please conclude since we are crossing the 15-minute mark?
okay, sure, sure. So the migration is a livelihood option for them rather than a restricting thing for them. So similarly, I have other voices from the field. Uh, some voices which have benefited from the state intervention. The state have provided them improved seeds, chemical fertilizers, and new varieties of crops. So the women farmer Mamta explains that she has completely left growing the traditional crops. Now she has decided to grow marigolds because she was trained by the people of the through this project, and now she's earning something around 5,000. Another farmer says that he has earned around 3,000 by planting chrysanthemums and selling it to the nearby markets in the cities. And this way they are earning good cash and they are able to provide uh, themselves income, and they are helping the family also. And another farmer shares that she has started to rear goats. This family got goats from this project, so they are now selling goat milk. And because of the dengue thing, they are able to sell the milk of the goat at higher price, and this way they are supplementing their income. So, so even though the project has benefited the people in terms of cash, but my contention is that this is not a very sustainable solution. And the planning which has been done, which I observed in the field, that it was a very top-down top-down planning thing. People sitting in the offices in Delhi and in the center at Uttarakhand, they planned the project. They were not aware of the local issues. They were not aware of the what local people were going through. And this area is a very organically rich area, and they have a sociological fabric here. And 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 during the implementation of the project also, it was seen that the local people, not everybody got a chance to be represented in the project. The marginal people, the very poor in the people in the village did not get a chance to get benefited from the project because they were not close to the headmen in the village. And that's how it's not a very participatory thing and inclusive thing. And in doing so, I see that this has become a very social and a political issue. And this quick fix solution of giving them fertilizer in an area which is quite depleted in resources. So my contention is that even though this might have benefited in the short term, but in a long term, this might degrade the Himalayan ecosystem. And I may answer further in questions when asked. So I will stop my presentation here. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Aradhana. I'm sure you'll get a chance during the Q&A session to explain some of these things further. So let's see. Saloni, do you see any questions in the... No, not yet. If you have any, the audience, if you have any questions, please, you can put them in the Q&A box, and it'll enable our panelists to tell us a little bit more about the details. And if no one has any question right now, I can maybe begin with a question, or if Anna, you have a question.
You can go first.
Okay, so it's very interesting because like I said earlier, I mean, it's very welcome that now a lot of research attention is being focused on places like Majuli and other places in the Northeast, which until not too long ago were completely, I mean, hidden from view, even within India, let alone outside India. So, but it's interesting because I think yesterday also I was very fortunate to be in this panel where I think one of our, I think I still see him in the audience, Vikas Chetri was presenting also about Majuli. And so I noticed this small image that was actually in, I think, Sutirtha's one of the slides. You know, you had the picture of that famous gentleman who's planting a lot of saplings and trying to... So this is... So on the one hand, it is a land issue, where the land is eroding and, you know, in Majuli. And so that's a big... That's the story that everyone knows, right? And that it's disappearing. Similarly, I mean, there was another presentation yesterday on Bangladesh, which was also talking about how, you know, in the southern deltaic region, I mean, land is being lost. But at the same time, you know, when the SOR, they come up in different places, you have... So anyway, so my question is, you said something very interesting. I mean, because you showed, for example, at least a third kind of the grassland that you showed, the arid one. This is... Most people believe that this is just wasteland in a way, right? And so... But what you were saying is this: the state policies of afforestation, you know, is not really conducive to the actual sort of whatever sustaining of the natural ecology in a way, right? So do you see those kinds of efforts? And I think I would welcome also Abhishek to sort of weigh you on this, because I think you both are working in the same region and you're aware of this. So is there a conflict between these practices in a way? I mean, that's very community-led and community-driven. It's not a top-down effort, that afforestation effort in Majuli, for instance. There must be many other places where people are probably trying to do this, either of their own volition or because of influence from some, whatever knowledge source, or it's, I mean, whatever it might be. So is that how do you reconcile these things? I don't know. I mean, how does society state reconcile these two things? Because there's a very weak understanding scientifically of the ecology. At the same time, there's a very urgent need in terms of just a response to build resilience. I don't know. Yeah. So any clarification, that'd be very welcome. Thanks.
Yeah. So I think this is a question that I or anyone who studies grasslands get asked a lot about. So just to clarify a stand here, I think the important point here is to we are not advocating that trees should not be planted. I think the main issue, what's happening in most of these tree plantation activities, be it locally driven or in a top-down manner, is you're planting the wrong trees in the wrong places. So what's happening is that you and this is not universal, of course. There are like local-led initiatives. For example, if you think about the arid grasslands, people are planting acacias, which are very conducive to that landscape, support livelihoods through like fuel wood or whatever. But if you plant teak in a char, that is not going to survive, and that is not going to do any benefit for communities, not going to do any benefit for the biodiversity. And in fact, there's a big body of research from Uttarakhand, actually, led by Forrest Fleischman and a few others, Pushpendra Rana, who have seen that when people are planting trees in pastoral land, it's not just like the initial intent is to improve forest cover, but it's not really improving forest cover. And it's also being very wasteful economically. It's being wasteful. A lot of funds are being spent because after planting that tree, no one's following up on it. So the land is going waste because you have this whole area of land that was earmarked for trees, which did not succeed. And then you deprived communities of grazing rights. And so it's a lose-lose situation. So I think the important thing is to understand that fluvial landscapes like chars and chaporis, they're not just grasslands, they also have forests. They have like moist deciduous forests. In fact, Deering Wildlife Sanctuary, in my remote sensing work, I found that it's not just grasslands which are being reduced, it's also the deciduous forests which are reducing because of flooding efforts. So I think it's very important to like be guided about what kind of trees to plant in what kind of landscape, because it also kind of depends on what kind of soil you have in that. So it's just about like making the right choices and the right places. It's not advocating for one against another. I think that's what I have to say. And these benefit both biodiversity, benefit both people, and also like further all the larger agendas, be it climate change or be it like combating degradation. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, Abhishek, go ahead. You can, yeah, please.
Yeah, just to add to that conversation, I mean, it was a very interesting presentation, Sutirtha. Just to add to that, so I was at Majuli, I was talking to the forestman of India, Jadhav Payeng, and went to his forest. So the backstory is he was recently he's now known as the forestman of India. He single-handedly, converted a barren river island land into quite a vibrant forest, which now houses many small species of animals. Sometimes even tigers migrate from Kaziranga, and also rhinos migrate into his forest. So what his story is, he did a whole plantation in a chorland, and that has quite a lot of positive impact in the region. I mean, the local people are getting firewood, are utilizing that, and many of the animals which otherwise get washed away by the river are sometimes migrating to his island. And because of plantation also, he tells me that erosion has come down quite a lot. So he tells me, so in Majuli, we had seen certain departmental activities. The government had taken some bamboo plantation, but they did not pick up the right bamboo species. So what Jadhav Payeng tells me is there's a species called Mokalba in Assamese. We call it Mokalba. So that actually helps to very strongly retain the soil. So I think all of this traditional knowledge which people like him carries, they have been, changing the forests and the local ecosystem for last thousands of for centuries, and making sure that those ill effects of disasters and all these things do not happen. And his forest is again a very contrast, that plantation, single-handed plantation of different native species has led to increase in biodiversity, help local communities for livelihood. Many animals graze there. Many of the buffaloes of local missing herdsmen, they graze there. So again, a positive side. But again, grasslands uh, have also, and the government also, I've seen in Manas National Park, I've seen they cut down, there's a lot of grassland and forest management going on. They cut down trees just to ensure that there's enough grassland. Or there's this Bombax ceiba tree, Semul, which we call it, Himolu in Assamese. So it is taking over a large area of grasslands in many of these eastern Himalayan foothills, which many feel is dangerous. That's where the government is also coming up with grassland management, and they're cutting down these Himolu trees just to ensure grassland flourishes. But yeah, it's quite interesting. So I wanted to ask you, Sutirtha, about, did you look at the PGR and VGR lands, so the professional grazing reserves and the village grazing reserves in Assam, which are, I think, quite an interesting thing which we have. I think Pobitora Wildlife Sanctuary was a professional grazing reserve previously, where rhinos came and inhabited.
I did not. No, in fact, I haven't begun my fieldwork component of my PhD yet. So, but the hope is that once I've laid the groundwork to sort of go back to Arunachal and Assam both, and to sort of explore these local ways by which people are actually, because it's not that the grasslands are not there, they're there, and it's mostly by the effect, like the joint involvement of people there, because it's a very tiny proportion of area which is inside protected area, which is managed by the forest department. Most of it is outside, so there has to be some mechanism by which they are being protected. And I completely agree with you that these choices of local native flora being planted to support a forest or a biodiversity, that's very rare in India. Like most of the people, like if you look at those commercial plantations, it's a monoculture of a single species of tree which is coming up in that entire landscape, and they usually solve maybe one economic problem, but will add 10 more. And I think it's and in these instances, it's important for us to sort of uphold the learnings from communities there who know the biodiversity well, who know what trees to plant. And yeah, so very, very rightly that you said.
Yep. Anna, you can ask. I just want to say, yeah, I mean, when I was young, social forestry was just eucalyptus trees everywhere.
Yeah.
It was in my childhood, that was what we saw in the name of forestry mostly. I mean, anyway, Anna, please, you have a question. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, before I ask my question, I want to say, Sutirtha, it's so nice to hear you speaking. I've known Forrest for a while, and it's great to see like what is being done in the world of people who work with forest. And as you study birds, you probably also may know Shanta Hismati.
I don't know, how do you know her? She's in the same lab as I am. So
Shanta was my roommate in undergrad. One of them. Anyway.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, but I have a question for Jibanji, which is also actually about grass, but not really in the same way as we were talking in terms of Assam. As you may be aware, I work in lower altitude areas of Nepal, and so the high altitude areas where I might go are places where people might take their buffaloes, and what they are really interested in is what time to go when the grasses that the buffalo, like the buki, is ready. So I'm wondering if you're seeing, or the people who are in these two herding communities in Manang and Palilum, are they noticing a change in when the specific grasses that the yaks like to eat are available, and when they can take their herds to different places. Is that one of the things that's affecting them?
Thank you. Thank you, Anna, for your question. Yeah, the villagers or the herding communities are facing some challenges about the availability of the grasses. Yeah, in the mountain regions, the availability of the grass depends on the timing of snowfalls and the amount of the snowfall. Yeah, if the snowfall occurs in the early time, the grass begins to grow in the earlier times, and that will help to grow the grass on time. Then that have the more value to the local pastoral communities. Yeah, it also depends on or also influence the mobilities of the livestock from one grazing land to the another grazing land, and especially in the case of yak, that is only keep in above the 3,000 meter, and in the past I heard that they used to keep in below the 3,000 meter, but the increasing temperature is not suitable for keeping them in the lower altitude, and then they are moving the habitat of yak to the high altitude. Yeah, in the case of Monan, I was in here for the first time in 2012 when I was doing my PhD, and I heard from the local herders that they used to keep their yak in the Kromche that is located in 3,000 to around 3,000 meter altitude. But that altitude is not only the grazing land. They also practice the crossbreeding between the yak and the local cow. And the local cow cannot live in the high altitude, and the yak cannot live in the low altitude. And that place was more suitable for breeding between the cow and the yak, for breeding the hybrid, for the productions of hybrid. That is called the Zoma or Urang in the Palelung. Yeah, Zopa or in the Monang, or also called the Cho Ama. Cho or Cho Ama. Cho for the male and Cho Ama for the female. And in other part, Zopa, and that is for the male, as well as the female too. And in the Falelung Urang, that is for the female. But the shift of the place not only shift the grazing land, but also shift their traditional knowledge attached with the place. Yeah, the indigenous knowledge was rooted on that place for the grazing, for reproducing the hybrid. So all of them, these issues are indigenous knowledge. The climate change is not only impacting to the temperatures or the other phenomena, the physical environment, but also to the also breaking the human and environment relations in the highland. And when I talk with the local peoples, they see that the grazing land or the grasses are gradually declining due to the invasions of new species, like in the Falelung, the lalchon, that is the non-friendly, non-cattle friendly grasses. It's gradually increasing in their area. In the Monang too, the thorny bushes are gradually increasing in the grassland. That is also creating the shortage or to the local herders. And in the finally, that will create the conflict between the wildlife and the domestic livestock. And finally, the state or the non-government organizations impose the law for the conservation of wildlife because the shortage of the grasses, and that will badly affect, that will be affected to the local communities to graze their livestock in the grazing land in the Himalaya.
Thanks, Jivan. Let's see if we have another question from anybody. Otherwise, I was going to ask a question. I mean, because Aradhana was mentioning about how, I mean, all of you have kind of, so not just alluded, but explicitly, I mean, demonstrated how people's and communities' livelihoods are being sort of completely lost and transformed. But at the same time, I mean, there are maybe in a geographical region or whatever, in a certain ecology, you have different kinds of communities, many different communities. Some are probably much farther along in the transformation, where they have probably their livelihoods, traditional livelihoods, completely been lost. Other ones are probably in the process. You also mentioned another generational difference, which I would assume, right? Even where there is not much, say, external impacts, sometimes even internally, I mean, there's a change that happens, and the young generation does not want to maybe continue with some of the, so I mean, so my question is, I mean, for all of you, maybe to, I mean, tell us a little bit about, so on the one hand, I mean, from research, it is definitely evident that allowing more local communities to sort of have control over their environments and livelihoods is very necessary, and it generally tends to bring about, I mean, desirable sort of changes, or sort of prevent very rapid transformation, which is sort of not desirable. However, might it be the case that sometimes it can lead to sort of a very confounding space where maybe the communities themselves maybe want to change and don't want to do this, whereas from a conservation point of view or preservation point of view, that is what is desirable? So, I mean, have you encountered such kind of situations where it's not necessarily, I mean, we usually ascribe blame to the state, I mean, which is justified in how it deals, but sometimes do you think, because of the fact that it's a continuum, and some, I mean, communities have already gone so far along, that it's difficult to sort of reverse the process in a way and hope for that? I'm just speculating, so I'm just, I mean, trying to, how do you deal with that in a way, yeah, in those kinds of situations?
Yeah, if I may start.
Yes, please, please.
How do you deal with that is a very big question. And you have rightly pointed out that I have observed this thing in my study area, that people, especially the younger generations, they have become quite aspirational. And they have seen the life in the cities. They have seen the, luxuries, and they have the desire to get that in life. So they are not letting themselves, limiting in any chance. They are telling that we are going to use fertilizers. We are not going to stay as an organically producing state here. If this gives us money, we will continue. So this is what is very, very grappling to me, that if the environment is very depleted, it's ecologically delicate, then if the community themselves is willing to go as far as, and they are not letting themselves conserve in any manner, they are telling that if this environment is inhibiting us, we don't care. We have certain aspirations. We are not going to stay in poverty. We are going to go ahead with income generating options, even if it means that this area becomes, we are going to throw in as much fertilizer and pesticide as much as we can. The only thing they have said that it is becoming expensive for us. So that means that if they have the money to deploy more and more pesticide and fertilizer, they'll go ahead with it. And the only restriction they have is that they have less amount of money. So they were telling that we want subsidies on chemicals and pesticides and fertilizers, so that we can put more in the agriculture field, and then we can get more produce, and then we can sell it in the market for a higher price. So this is what they have said, and this is a grappling thing for me. I'm not able to adjust to this fact. Yeah.
One of you, Sutirtha, Abhishek, Jiban, anybody?
Yeah.
Actually, maybe I'll put another question to that, I think, which is relevant. So, I mean, my field is urban planning, and effectively, most of my research involves community participation and interinstitutional, I mean, sort of collaboration. And in planning, we very much recognize that although I mean it's not really realized to the same extent, but it's very well recognized that you have to work with communities, and you have to sort of step back and be a facilitator for different institutions to work together for more, I mean, for better outcomes anyway. But it's not an easy task, I mean, working with communities. So there's also another thing, like, so like, for example, like in the US or in the West, I mean, in the US, particularly at the community level, in order to get community sort of acceptance, or to behoove communities to, I mean, work in a certain way, I mean, you always, like you talked about NGOs and civil society organizations, but there's also the role of faith-based organizations, which is more recognized in the West here, I mean, I would say. So I'm raising this question because, I mean, also this is, again, Abhishek and Satirtha, I mean, so in Majuli, for example, the Hotro is a very big entity. So do you think, I mean, so, but it's also, so do you think like involving local leaders who are religious leaders or faith-based institutions, etc., in local communities could be one of the ways in which maybe more agreement could be, I mean, among community members could be sort of achieved in a way?
If I may.
Yeah, please, anyone can go in. It's just an open question. Yeah.
Not Majuli specifically, but I was working in Meghalaya for a couple of projects, and one of that was looking at the impact of the REDD+ mechanism under the UN, where quite a lot of forests were restored. And in Meghalaya, if you see there are a lot of village councils, which are traditional institutions led by elderlies from the village, and who take quite a lot of decisions. Under India's constitution also, we have the 6th schedule, which gives them the power of autonomous governance and all of that. And there, many of the civil societies and whatever funding came from abroad for restoration of an area around Moflang, which has the water source for Shillong's water supply, right? They're involving the Dorbar Shnong, the village council, was quite helpful. And the village elders who are called the Rangba Shnong, they also came in and helped facilitate all these initiatives there. But again, there are a lot of power dynamics when we talk about communities. It's not that flat. Certain people have quite a lot of influence, and there are certain benefits which they want out of it. If we look at Guwahati, south of the city, the hills in Meghalaya, the village councils, for their own benefits, are leasing out to quarrying and mining companies. All the hills are being cut down just across it's like a Martian landscape. If you look on satellite map, miles and miles of red soil and tropical forests being finished off, hills being finished off. And that land is used to reclaim lowlands in Guwahati. So there again, the community leaders play a very different role. They are leasing out all those hills. So it's not a very flat thing. It has a lot of dynamics, where a lot of power games within the communities. And so when we say the community wants it, but who in the community wants it is the biggest question,
Thank you. We have another about 6 minutes, so I'm just forewarning that we would maybe like to end on time, so you guys can go stretch, relax, and if you come back for our last panel, which will start at 5:34 p.m. here. At 6 p.m. is when we'll start the last one. So just giving you some advance notice.
Yeah, I agree with Abhishek. Yeah, that the community is not a homogeneous group. Yeah, we can see the power dynamic within the community. Yeah, so so it is very challenging task to us to understand the power dynamic that operate in the societies. So it will take time to know the power dynamics in the societies, in the communities. And while I was working in the Manang, there was a local or the indigenous socio-political organizations that used to manage the forest or the other kind of resources, including the cultural practices in the communities. And but I tried to link with the forest only, the state. it was in the mid 80s, the state started to manage the forest through the establishment of different state mechanisms, and by keeping the local institutions or the local leader out. Thereafter, the forest started to degrade, and then the local peoples later realized that the scarcities of the resources and then they revive their mm, socio-political institution that they had under the different name that is called the Bausoma, that is the father group. And and thereafter they are able they were able to manage the resources against by implementing the treaty, that is the communities or the customary law, to govern uh, uh, the governs the behavior of the individuals in a society. Yeah. So, so we have to include not that does not mean that the local institutions are is only capable to manage the resource. So, the different stakeholders go together to the manage of the resource. And then the main issue is that we are talking about the sustainability or the sustainability and the sustainability. Even we talk about the development of the plant change. Yeah, this is a more contested issue in the case of the Himalaya. We heard a story about the four blind men and the four blind persons and the elephant. Yeah, but but my question is that the sustainability is for the home. Yeah, the planner or policymakers only think from the top down perspective. For example, in the case of Nepal, the government declared that we will increase the number of tigers 2 times by 2022. But the government reached the targeted before the year. Yeah. But the local people who are residing nearby the national forest are more victimized by the increase of the numbers. The sustainability is for whom is the more challenging issues in the context of the South Asia.
Thank you. So Tirtha, want to say something, or we have a quick half a minute,
just a
maybe?
quick- Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to articulate this well, but going back to the first question that you asked, I think like Jeevan had mentioned the tiger, just kind of made me think that sometimes when you think about communities and their will to like do something else and rather than staying back and do what they've been doing, I think it's important to kind of make that distinction as to whether their aspiration is something that they're doing of their own accord or they're being gaslit into doing it. The reason why I'm saying this is when I think about tiger reserves in India, a lot of communities are deprived of basic facilities who live inside protected areas. So if you want to relocate them, what the state does is they'll be like, you don't have healthcare here, but you have it outside. So why don't you move outside? So I think in that case, it seems like a lot of people are forced, although they may call it a voluntary relocation. So I think like in that case, the aspiration becomes a very complicated issue for us to think about. People should be able to make those decisions themselves. And I feel like these state mechanisms, which are like rather subtle, should not be at play when they're making those decisions. And I mean, these are like things I've noticed when I was doing fieldwork in central India and in around the tiger reserves in Kana and Pench, where yeah, so I mean that's just like something that popped in my mind. I don't know if I've been able to
No, I
articulate
think
that.
you were, I mean, I think what you were basically also, I mean, trying to indicate what was, I think, concluded at the end of the previous, I mean, panel which Anna was moderating, is like decolonizing the whole discourse. I mean, that also means like the colonized mindset of, I mean, people who are in the post-colonial state in a way, right? So thank you so much. And I think it was very, very illuminating, and each one of you is doing very vital research, I think, and so important. So I wish you personally all the best, and I think may your, I mean, work bear fruit and more fruit, and I think hopefully it changes the discourse and everything. So wish you all the very best. And before I conclude, I also wanted to actually thank my colleague Anna Stur for such, I mean, so wonderfully synchronizing the papers in the panels, because I think this, I mean, yielded a very, very, I think, productive and fertile discussion here, and I'm sure more things will flow from this. So thanks, Anna, and thanks, Saloni, for moderating, and for everyone else who, I mean, listened in. So thank you. So let's take a short break, and then I think we resume in about 18 minutes from now, exactly. And then I think that is going to be the ultimate panel for our symposium. And so we'll see you shortly. Hopefully you'll stay with us for the rest of it. So thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye-bye all.
Well, it was very enjoyable. And your papers just all came in together. So it wasn't really us. It was just like, oh, these fit together so well.
No, don't reduce the credit that you deserve. It took some work. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Anyway.
Okay, maybe see
All
you
right.
in the next session. Thank
Yeah.
you.